Okay, so now we should be ready to begin animating our character. So I'm going to switch to pose mode. And then to start animating, the best thing is just to switch over to this animation workspace, which you can find with this tab up here. And you should see it looks something, oops, yours will look like this. It should look something like this. So we have our 3D viewport at the top. We have this down here, which is called our dope sheet. So we can see we have our keyframes, which I will delete all of these existing ones because I've been trying things out before. So this is where our keyframes will go. And then down here at the bottom, we have playback controls. So in many cases with Blender, we could just work using the dope sheet as it is, but because we're working for a game, we want to switch to the action editor, which lets us create reusable actions to build longer animations. So in a game, we'll probably want to create things like a walk cycle, an attack animation, or a jump animation, or whatever you can imagine. So in order to do that, we want to switch our dope sheet into a different mode called the action editor. So I can click here where it says dope sheet and switch to the action editor. You can see I've created a new action already called walk. Yours will say new here. So I'll click that and I'll say call it walk. Why not? So now if I press this record button right here, which you can see when I mouse over, it says auto keying. I can click on a bone, grab it to move it, and that sets a keyframe for it. And then I can do that for each of these. Because we're making a walk cycle, I want it to start mid-cycle. And if I want to see all my keyframes for all of my channels, is what these are called, but for the different bones I've set keyframes for, I can press the A key to select them all. And it'll show me all of them together. So this is my timeline here. So I can, here we go. If I click and drag this keyframe in this top row here, the summary row, it'll actually move all the keyframes below it. So this is a good way to start building our animations, is to think of it in terms of poses, which on the dope sheet or the action editor will look like this kind of vertical stack of keyframes. So I'll go ahead and slide my playhead out to 20. And here I'll begin to build my next pose. So I'll move this foot out to where I think I'll want it to step. And I'll grab my root bone, G, and then Y, and slide it forward until our foot lands. I think I actually moved this foot out too far, and it's also too far down. So I'll just slide us to about here, and then I'll move this back and up. So there we go. You can see now when I'm dragging my playhead back and forth, it's sliding that foot forward. Depending on how you want to lay out your game, or interactive experience, you could have your character walk in place. I find it's easy to move my entire character in the animation in Blender, and then I can use that information in Unity to control how it moves in Unity later on. This will prevent things like your feet appearing to skate around. If it's really using the same movement data from this animation, your feet will remain planted nicely on the ground as you're walking around. So I'll move that there. So that's one key pose. And I'll go out to 40 and I'll do my next step there. So actually, wait, I'll go back here. So if I select all, we can see we don't have a keyframe here for this left foot. So I'll go here to 20, and then I can press the I key to insert keyframe. That was I to open this window. And I'll say all channels. And this has this bar connecting them, which means that this foot doesn't move at all. This foot IK bone stays in the same position from this keyframe to this keyframe, which is important. We want this is the foot that we're dealing with here. We want it to stay in place. We don't want it moving at all. So now I'll go out to 40. I'll move this foot bone, grab Y, I'll just slide it forward a little ways. I'll grab this root bone, G, and then Y to slide it forward. And that was maybe a little too far, so I'll move this bone back, just so that we never are locking our knees all the way. So we can see we're sort of shuffling our feet forward. This is a good way to build animation. Start with some general poses and then work in the details in between, right? I want to go here, and just so that we're consistent, we'll go I, all channels. So now this right foot is locked in place from 20 to 40. Okay, if I didn't do that, let's say I don't have this keyframe here. I delete that. Now this animation doesn't know that this foot is supposed to stay in the same place until 20 and then begin moving. It will begin moving at 0 and go all the way through 40. So now we'll see both feet moving forward at the same time, which we don't want. So I'll just hit undo a few times, Control Z. So now that foot stays in place until 20 and then slides forward. So now I want to add some in-between poses here. I'll go to 10. I want these feet not to slide forward, but to pick up off the ground, right? So I'll go here to 10, and I'll take this foot, I'll pick it up, and maybe even rotate it a little bit. So now we have a slightly more realistic lift and place. I could go here to 30, select the other bone. And so we can see we're sliding forward, that foot's sliding forward. I'll go to 30, pick it up, rotate it, there. So now we have a pretty nice walk cycle. And I can hit this button here, the play button, to preview what it's going to look like. If I want to see it looping properly, I need to go down here where it says start and end, and I'll set end to 40 because that's where my loop happens to end. Once I have the basic motion working, I could go back and add other details. For instance, maybe the root node should bob up and down as it walks. So I'll go to the side again. I like this side-on view for working on a walk cycle. So I go to my in-between on 10, excuse me. And maybe I'll pull this up just a touch. And maybe I'll rotate it on the y-axis because when we walk, our hips kind of sway back and forth. So I can rotate it like that. Maybe I'll view it from the front to do this. Like that. And then like that. Oh, we don't want to do that actually. Okay. So now, and then here we can lift up just a touch, and we can rotate the other way. So now if I look at it, there's a lot more that could be done to finesse this, but this is the basic idea. All right. So then if I wanted to create another animation for this, say an idle pose where it's just standing in place, I'll pause it, I'll go back here. And then I'll, next to where I created this, with the shield, this will force us to sort of create a fake user for this data. Don't worry about that. What that means, just press the shield to kind of make sure we're saving that animation. And then I'll create a new action. And I'll call it idle. And when I do that, it actually copies walk to be idle. So I can go back here. I'll just move these to be in place. And then I'll delete all these other, I'll delete all these other keyframes. Oh, I see. I turned off auto keying for some reason. So now that I have auto keying on, I'll set my pose to be the way I want it. Maybe it stands up a little more. And a lot of times, just to give characters a sense of life when they're standing still, to give our characters a sense of life when they're standing still, we want to have them bob up and down in place. So I can do that pretty quickly just by moving out to, say, 30 with my root bone selected. I'll put a keyframe here so we come back to the same place. And then at 15, I'll take this and I'll just move it down a little bit. So now this character does this kind of thing. You don't need to be so worried about you don't need to be so worried about this end thing here. Unity knows to loop it at the last keyframe. All right, so that's it for now. And then in the next video, I'll show you what this looks like in Unity. So I'll save my file for sure, and then hit the shield to save the idle. So you can see I still have my walk cycle, and I have my idle pose. All right, we are good.